Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Did everyone have a good lunch?
Yes.
This is what I'm afraid of. This is, by the way, the dreaded afternoon time slot, the one straight after lunch. So I had to get some advice, as you can tell, from a couple of different sources. And I think they've been some pretty good advice, I will say. I'm going to do a lot of it, but I'm not going to do all of it. For example, I'm not going to ask you to move around and ask people to take a 1 to 2 minute break for lunch. But I think what I'm hoping for is an engaging session, an interactive session. We're going to be talking a lot. We're going to be learning from each other a lot. And I'd love to take it from there. So my name is Sunand Menon. And together with, I'm an executive fellow here at Harvard Business School. And so together with Professor Linda Hill and with another executive fellow called Anne LeCam, I teach a program called Leading in the Digital Era. It is an executive education program. And we've been doing it for the past 3 years. And every year I feel like we are constantly reinventing it because things keep changing all the time. But when we're not teaching this program, we're also researching the subject as well. And that's what the topic of this conversation is going to be about. Today's topic is leading in an AI-enabled world. And as I said, it's the program itself and what we've been talking about is leadership-oriented. It's not a technical program. Having said that, my background is technical. I spent the last 20 years helping companies create and grow digital businesses, data, analytics, and now increasingly AI-enabled businesses. I trained as an engineer. So I dug up my old thesis, and so what you see over here actually is an old form of generative AI. It was optimal control theory. So you can tell that was from 30 years ago, 1994. Wow. So as you can tell, generative AI, the concepts of generative AI were existing for quite some period of time in a different form, so to speak. I trained as an engineer for 5 years, worked as an engineer for 5 years, yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit more why you make the parallel?
Well, at the same time, when you use optimal control, what you're doing is you are giving prompts, and you're saying, this is what my end conditions should be, and therefore, using these constraints and these end conditions, what is the best way to get there? That was the case in the thesis work that I'd done over there. Now, at the same time, as early as late as 2019, 2020, I also was working with a software company called PTC, where I was doing the SaaS transformation for the company. But one of the things there was also, we had another type of generative AI called generative design, where you actually gave prompts for what type of mechanical equipment you wanted to actually build, and out would come a number of different solutions, and you choose based on what your specifications were as well. So there are different forms of generative AI that we've sort of known about, but it hasn't been anything near to what we've experienced ever since November 2022, when ChatGPT came out, OpenAI came out open as well. So anyways, my sort of work over these past 20 years was really helping, I was at Thomson Reuters for 10 years and building data analytics businesses. I ran 3 of their digital businesses when I was running new ventures as well. And while I was doing this also for other companies later on, I noticed that you would end up creating a digital strategy. You would end up creating an implementation plan where you do the technology, you build the infrastructure, you develop the different business models and so forth as well. And then when you're running it over a period of time, you suddenly realize that the aspirations you had for where you wanted to grow weren't sometimes fulfilled. And in a lot of those, when you do this sort of a postmortem of that, a lot of those happen to be leadership or organization related, so not technology related. And so with that in mind, when Professor Linda Hill asked me and Anne to come and join her to do some research because we really wanted to understand the leadership implications of what it means to be in this day and age. Because if you think about this, look at all of these technologies here. They've really only come to the mainstream in the past 20, 30 years or so. And it's something that certainly when I was an MBA student here in class of 2001, I think I have a few of my section mates here as well already. These are the kind of things that we didn't really sort of learn about from a leadership perspective. And so the way to lead is actually different. And our thesis was, it's a different mindset, different set of behaviors, and different set of capabilities that we should be investigating. And so that was really the impetus for us to do our research. And we did the research in conjunction with the team that I mentioned before, but we also brought in some digital natives in our team who can really help us with the lay of the land and sort of reverse mentor us as well. And we worked with the HBS Global Research Centers. There are so many of these centers all around the world. And what they helped us with was setting up these roundtables, as you see over here. We spoke to almost 250 senior executives all around the world, and basically every continent except Antarctica. And it was across all of the major industrial sectors. We also administered, now in its third year, a survey, again, to senior executives. And this now surveys more than 6,500 executives from over 100 countries. And that gave us sort of a view of what we feel might be the relevant characteristics that leaders need to have and organizations need to have in order to really survive and thrive in this digital era, in this particularly AI-enabled era. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is first give you sort of a lay of the land of where these folks think they are in their digital transformation journey and their AI enablement journey. And then we'll double click into the AI element of it, which is what are they actually doing? Where are they actually using it? And what are they thinking about they're going to be using going forward? And then finally, we'll translate that into what do we think are the relevant organizational and leadership implications as we think about surviving and really thriving. Survive and thrive is something you'll hear from me a lot. All right, actually, before I go to the next stage, I want a show of hands. How many of you are in the earlier stages of a digital transformation process? It could be AI enablement, it could be something more digital data analytics oriented. Let's say 5 years in, up to 5 years in. Just raise a show of hands. All right. How many of you have been doing this for more than 5, so between 5 to 10 years?
Doing what?
Yeah, digital. In your digital, your organizations are in the digital transformation journey. So you're working with a company, and the company is now implemented data systems, is testing out AI systems, and all those types of things. How many of you have been doing it for longer than 5 years, but less than 10 years? Wow,
multiple companies?
Yeah.
Yes, multiple companies.
Okay, and how many of you have been doing it for more than 10 years? Okay, there's a handful over here. So when we asked these executives, this is what we heard, right? So only 2% haven't started yet, which is great. 50% have been doing this, more than 50% have been doing this for less than 5 years, right? So it's actually in the earlier stages of doing this. Here's the interesting part. Over a third have been doing this for longer than 5 years, which I thought was pretty awesome, right? I mean, there's 15% have been doing it for more than 10 years. Now, we asked the same question, but we asked them in a different way. We said, how much progress do you think? Anyone want to venture a guess? Complete opposite. What do you mean computer?
Like reverse this thing where it shows where the progress is 5%.
Interesting. So here's what they
being snarky, but
yeah, but so interesting. Here's what they said, which is actually quite interesting. So to give you a little bit of a context, blue here means those companies who feel like they're making a great deal of progress. We asked them to do it on a range of 1 to 6 or so, and 5 and 6 were a great deal of progress. So those who said 5 and 6, it's these ones. Now, a little caveat here. When we talk about all of this, right, we're talking about executives' perceptions. I'm talking in a roundtable, it's their perception of how they're doing. I'm asking in a survey, it's their perception of how they're doing, right? So one company's perception of their progress relative to their goals may be very different to another company's perception of their relative to their goals. But having said all that, when you put it all together, we still see some trends that are notable, and that's what we're kind of talking about here. So the trend we see here is those who are 1 to 5 years into the journey over here, which is more than half the people, but only about 30% feel like they made a significant amount of progress. You know, if you're in 1 year, it's even less, right? But those who've been doing it for longer, I mean, look at this. The folks who've been doing it for more than 10 years, there's only 15% of them who've been doing it for more than 10 years. But 70% of that 15 say that they're making a great deal of progress. So, what do you make of that?
My colleague here says that the goalpost is moving.
Sorry, you've got to speak louder.
My colleague here, Joash, says that the goalpost is moving all the time, and I have to agree.
So you're cold calling your colleague.
I can tell you something. More than 20 years ago, it was about getting processes and data model and implementing in automated systems, and then data governance. So there's many different things that you do at the time. At the time, there was no AI, of course. So you do what it's in the menu.
So your colleague is very, very astute.
Thank you.
So I mean, it takes a long time. There's a lot of processes and so forth as well, which you have to go through as one of the prerequisites. We heard just this morning in that major session the amount of importance that's attached to having the right data and the right infrastructure and everything in place as well. So that's something that's certainly one that you wanted to say something.
Well, I think that the difference too is that less than 1 year, you've got the revolt of the experts, right? And if you're born digital, you've been making new decisions with data from day one. So I think there's just a lot of change management or a lot of scaffolding against adoption.
I like that. I might use that at some point. The revolt of the experts. So you're saying here, there's a lot of resistance.
Well, yeah, because prediction and judgment hasn't been decoupled yet. It just still exists in a person that's got experience. But up above, prediction and judgment was decoupled from day one.
Yeah. Yes.
It just makes me wonder if they've been at it for 10 plus years, if they created a whole bunch of technical debt to be disrupted in the, with what's happening now.
Yeah. That's also possible.
So leading on from what my colleague here said, I think it's a culture thing. Like if it's a company, if you're Amazon or something, I mean, maybe born digital is a bit pretentious, right? But it's normal, it's part of it. I work in financial services where specifically insurance, which is kind of slow to change. So I think part of it is those companies, everyone, a bit also what you're saying, that people have got used to it. That's part of it. You join, Google and Amazon and whatever. Even Walmart is pretty good at this stuff as far as I know, right? Because that's part of it and that's what you want to do. Whereas you don't necessarily, join an insurance broker because you really want to do, digital transformation. So I think a lot of it is about the company culture. And I'm a board member now, so that's something we think about a lot.
Well, so we are going to spend a bit of time on company culture. So I will, I'll ask you one question. What have you experienced that explains this as well? Company culture was one that you talked about. Yes.
Data processes and the cleanliness of the data from one server to the next, and not having the infrastructure put into place. You're cleaning a lot of data up front, so you're doing a lot of work right away, and then you're starting to see a gain. So you're not going to get a big gain until you're further down the road.
And one of the things we've also noted, I mean, that's very right. I mean, one of the things we've also noted is that, in 1 second, is that many of these executives were saying that it's like a moving goalpost, right? Things keep changing all the time. And so you're never, ever feeling like you've reached your goals. You're getting close to it and then something changes. And then, you come to November 2022 and all of a sudden you have to reevaluate everything else because everyone's jumping on the AI bandwagon, so to speak. So we like to call this digital maturity as opposed to digital transformation, because it's not like you go, I've reached enlightenment and I don't need to do any more. It's never going to be the case. So you wouldn't think?
Well, I've been at this sort of company transformation for about 50 years. And the basic rule of thumb is any major transformation takes 10 years. And all companies have to be reinvented after about a decade. So your finding is just consistent. It's just big organizations, particularly if they're successful.
Indeed, indeed. And in fact, what we're realizing also is while these systems need time to change, the pace of innovation is going faster than we're able to change as well. So we have to struggle with that, and it's causing us. I mean, you saw everything that Ethan was showing, we're like blown away. I mean, it's like that's the kind of stuff that we have to deal with. All right, so let me jump in now to when you do a little double click, because one thing we did this year was we really wanted to understand the AI usage. And this is what we asked them, very basic question to start things off, which is, how many of you are actually using AI in some form or fashion? And what we see here is about half of them, half of the companies, this is 2,341, half of them are using it in some form or fashion. And when we ask them to project how many of them are going to be using it 3 years from now, I'm surprised it's not 100%, but it's okay. It's 87%, which is not a huge amount, in some form or fashion. And then we ask them, where exactly will you be using this? Right? In which of your functions do you think you'll be using this? And this is what they told us, right? So just to give you a lay, this is 2024, and we're saying, because we did this earlier on this year, customer service. Out of the 2,341 executives that we spoke to from over 100 countries, 50% of them are using AI in customer service in some form or fashion. And you've just heard about the types of things you can do. And then the same thing, 15% are using them in production, or not even 20% of them are using them in finance and accounting. So does that seem right? Does that seem intuitively okay for you?
No. So when you ask the first question, I'm in production, so it's how do I apply into production, right? It's very labor intensive. I don't face the customer. I can make processing more efficient, but if I still need X amount of people to do manual work, where do I actually find benefit, right? Of using, you use Asana, Task Manager, stuff like that, or Slack or whatever. Okay, that helps a little bit in efficiency in terms of day-to-day operations, but where can I actually find something exponential in terms of efficiency?
So you're saying, I've got all these people, I've got all these processes, I need to find something which is tangible, which is going to really move the dial for me, and I haven't found anything so far yet. Interesting. Anyone else? Yes.
Like the way I read this is like those 4 categories were low-hanging fruits.
Yeah.
So everyone grabbed them. The real innovation is going to come in the categories that you don't see there, which is like sales, product management, HR. Like I've seen people talking about these things, but there is more innovation needs to happen. And those are the groups that were never talking to technology teams ever before. So
Are you an alum here, by the way?
No.
Because you would have been one of those Baker scholars.
From my experience working with clients, this feels overstated.
Which one feels overstated?
The customer
whole thing,
service.
or?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Ah, interesting. Tell me more.
Well, a couple of observations. What we see with clients is they go through a life cycle of generative AI. A lot of clients are in testing phase at this point. They haven't been able to figure out how to roll it out at production and scale. The second thing is maybe the executives are answering it's because of its personal productivity use, as opposed to changing the workflows, because there's no barriers to trying this stuff out in the organization.
It's a valid point. We did ask them not, you don't use it for making poems or anything like that, or your birthday things or that. It's got to be for work, so that's for sure. But I think you're right in that everyone's still in testing phase, right? They're still trying to understand and process what's going on. How do I use this? How do I try this? And by the way, I see, I'm going to cold call Tuck here. Tuck. I see the Russell Reynolds guys have come up with a report, which I thought was really great, which was they actually asked a bunch of executives and asked them, how are you using it? Which phase are you using it? And so you can see that some are in testing phase, some are in sort of production phase and so forth as well. So there's a whole gamut of all those things, which I think is useful. Now, here's what when we asked them, what's it going to look like 3 years from now? This is what they told us, right? So in the red, it's 2027. What do you make of that? I'm going to pick someone in the middle here, because they haven't spoken enough in the middle.
Well, I kind of wonder if that's aspirational or if there's a roadmap to that. Because I'm sure there's a lot of those that it's like, I'd love to automate and use AI for more finance and accounting, but I see no roadmap for it. There's not a lot of technology or anything even coming out today that gets that. So it's used that much more. So I don't know if
This is sort of like a...
I mean,
I'm not sure I understand, because if I look at production and product management staying the lowest, like, isn't AI and robotics, and that's going to be like a huge growth area? Like, I don't understand why it's so low.
It's funny you say this, because this is sort of the thinking process that we had when we were analyzing this later on. So a couple of things that we've noticed. First of all, without a doubt, everyone's saying, yeah, I use AI a little bit, and I'm testing and experimenting a little bit, and I'm sure I'm going to use it a lot more. And that's why all the reds are pretty much high. Then I know my business, and remember, these are C-suite executives. So a CFO may not necessarily know what the applications are in production, right? So there's a little bit of that we have to try and understand as well. And then there's actually one other aspect which I think is a contributor to this, which is actually bigger than we think it is. Now, you just saw Azim in that conversation. He talks about the exponential view. We have a professor here at HBS called Shikhar Ghosh, who some of you may know him. He teaches a program called 3 Technologies That Will Change the World by 2035, right? One of them was actually spoken of very poorly today, blockchain. But we have AI, blockchain, and synthetic biology, right? But the whole concept of exponential change is something that is actually really tough for anyone to understand, right? We are so used to thinking of things in a linear fashion, right? What happened before is what's going to happen going forward, and maybe it's going to go a little bit faster. Oh, look at the internet. I know since 1994 or 1993 when I had Netscape and what was it before? Mosaic. Yeah, Mosaic. When Mosaic came out, and I know what the trend is. I know Amazon came at this time, and therefore I think I can project the same thing going forward. And now with AI, maybe it's going to go a little bit faster. But actually, all of those technologies, in many cases, are exponential, and certainly AI in itself is exponential. So he spends a lot of time telling people to imagine what an exponential growth is looking like, with a bunch of different examples. One example that I really love and I can relate to is, anyone know the game Go? Strategy game Go, right? Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
Just explain very quickly what it is.
So it's, I did that for my daughter's high school application video. I have a script. So it's an old Chinese game that's like 2,000 years old. I think it's 18 line by 18 line. So it's a bunch of 300 arcs of crossing. And one player has red, black stone pebbles. One has the white one. And then You place one, the other place one. The objective of the game is to, if you circle the other side, then all that get eliminated away. And the eventual game is you want more than half of the 361 dots.
So it's a strategy game. It's been around for 2,500 years. We still play it. And over those years, we have improved. It's been passed down, strategies have been passed down, and we're improving. 2014, a startup called DeepMind, which is now owned by Google, says, I'm going to build a program that is going to really challenge and really try and learn how to play Go and be the best. In 2016, it learned from all of these games that humans have played. In 2016, it played against the world #1, Lee Sedol. 2 years. Beat him hands down. So this computer program, which learned through all these algorithms, in 2 years, beat the world #1 player. And then what do you do? What do you do after that? How do you improve something after that?
Play against yourself.
Play against yourself, right? So they built another program, which is even more fast and more higher computation, played against itself. How long did it take?
20 minutes.
3 days. 3 days before it beat that version that beat Lee Sedol. And then they said, okay, let's build another one, which is even more popular, which is even more complex and computational. That took 8 hours of training data before it beat the version that beat Lee Sedol. So 2,500 years, 2 years, 3 days, 8 hours. That's exponential. And that's something that we absolutely are not able to comprehend until we hear these types of examples. And I think that's what a lot of our executives are struggling with. These are all really smart people. Right? I say, oh, I think I'm going to double my use of AI because I can see 1 or 2 applications. I think it's going to really change dramatically. Now, a show of hands. Oh, Tuck, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that. I think the spot we are now, the use cases might be obvious, but we're asking executives who don't know what this is, what might happen. Like the business we're in now, we're saying, well, you should actually reimagine every one of the job specs for these functions as a person plus a robot, and who would be qualified to run that new position, then ask them the questions. So we're at a point here now where the C-suite jobs are not properly scoped for person or robot, and the people in them are the old model, right? So I think it's going to be really interesting to challenge each of your functions and figure out which one's at most risk and how do I reinvent it. We're early on that.
I think so. And here's something really funny.
One add-on on this, because we are talking about C-suites, but then we have the long-term persons in the company, in the boards, that even know less to talk about this than the C-suites. And so how do you create long-term value? So my point is that maybe many of the companies that said that they are not going to use AI, they will not exist in 3 years. And I think that the problem starts at the top of the pyramid right now, which is with governance, and how do you bring this knowledge to discuss how your business will be disrupted? Because maybe, for me, the most important point there is connected with strategic planning, is how your company will change. It's not about technology, how the business, the solutions that you're providing, the services. So, and I think that's more than really just if you are tackling sales or marketing, is the overall concept of your company.
So hold that thought.
Can I just add one thing since you've attacked the board members in the room? It's often the board members who may not know AI but ask the really tough questions because they're not going to lose budgets or people.
Yes.
When I look at that, I say, yeah, it's a little bit like this. But also, it's interesting, the low-hanging fruit seems to be the first thing in any technology wave. It's low-hanging fruit, it's incrementalism. And then the fear is if I touch the core, what's going to happen with the business while I'm going through the transformation? Because I got to report my earnings every quarter. So there's something about the risk dynamic that really has to change as well.
Yes.
So that you can see the other side of the valley that you're trying to get to and have the ability to go through the ups and downs to get there. I mean, I wonder in your first chart if some of those people that didn't see progress is because in the first few years, they had a bunch of projects that got funded and defunded and they didn't show progress, so they lost the leader. The board decided they didn't want to fund it anymore. And how many of those had consistent support financially and people-wise to work through it to get to where they want to
There
get
you go,
to.
the board perspective there. But I think the idea of boldness that you're talking about is something which is very important. That's something that we've heard as well. I'm just going to go very quickly through this because I wanted to spend a bit more time on this, but I realize I've got to, we've only got an hour and we can go on for ages. When we asked whether it was substitutive or complementary, this is the answer that we got. So there's a couple of things, and I'll go through this quite quickly, but there's a couple of things that struck us, which is, and I'm sure you can see it already. Actually, I know what I'm going to ask you. What two things do you see here?
Others gone.
Sorry?
Your other category's gone. And get it.
Delusional. I mean, because it's not popular. I mean, sorry to be political, but Hillary Clinton and the coal miners, right? If you say people are going to lose their jobs, which they are, but I'm not a politician, but I don't think people want to think about that.
So I feel like Sir Martin Sorrell was quite bold. When
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
It's the mix.
And I do think in certain areas, we really have to think about that, right? Because that combination of that exponential growth in AI and the possibilities, together with robotics, that could change substantially, right? In other areas, it may be less. But I think the point here is everyone's in this magic 80-20 rule. And I think it's going to be varying a lot more. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a time now. I'm going to give you maybe 3-4 minutes. I want you to just gather amongst your neighbors. Here's what we're going to do, a little exercise. This is what happens when you have an afternoon session. Think about, get 3 of you together, just bunch up, and think about in your organizations where you've been using it, how you've been using it, and what has worked, what hasn't worked. And particularly think about it from 2 perspectives, organizational perspective and leadership perspective. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to just talk about it. And I'm going to ask for some brave souls to raise their hand and give their experience.
I'll give you an example. And I would say the same thing. Straight up. We'd fly a little bit closer. Exactly. No financial advice. It's a whole decision planning. Why staying away from
preservation of organization as it is, that it just
But you should replicate yourself.
And that's happening, right? They feel like, oh, you're the intermediate, but that's not.
I think it's data.
You should have flashed the lights, right, you know?
So we have some volunteers. This is what happens when you sit right in front. You're voluntold. Go ahead.
All right, so we have two consulting companies here and one SaaS company. And so we talked about, are we really using LLMs right now? And we're just starting to think about them. And so then from my company that's using classic old-fashioned AI, machine learning, to do predictions, we started wanting to build our own GPT, because what we've been doing is scraping the web and then trying to get the regular GPT to score training and education, how well it fits to the factors that are driving predictions. Doesn't fit at all well. So the difficulties have been that my folks don't, it's very hard. So they want to revert back to doing it themselves and using their own brains as the GPT. And when we dug,
there's a resistance there.
Yeah, so when we dug underneath it, I think one of the issues is they don't know how to prompt. So we need to do more training. And I think the second issue is the only reason that we're continuing on the GPT path is because I'm the CEO. I have made the executive decision that we will do it. We are going to figure out how to do it.
Right, any other teams? I heard a lot of noise.
So for us, the commonality with us had to do with culture. I work in healthcare, and we are so slow. We have so much data, but there's this whole privacy issue. So culture has just been a whirlwind. I just joined my organization a year and a half ago, so I come in the disruptor and trying to change the culture. We're still working the culture part and trying to get them to even look at systems, right? But then you have to also, I'm in operations, so you have to make sure it's not disruptive. I think somebody said it. It's not disruptive enough that it's impacting financial, and we have to look at health outcomes and be efficient and still produce that value, right? So you got to have to juggle both and how to figure out that balance. She's a financial services, and same thing. She said from the higher level, they've all drunk the Kool-Aid, but then trying to get the lower managers to even buy in. And then he goes where he's in tech, and you think everybody should be using the technology, but it's sort of like it's not really spread out. People might be using ChatGPT on the side, but not really broadcasting. So you could tell that it's still a whole cultural bottom line.
Culture change is hard.
It's hard, yeah. So.
Anyone else?
Yep.
So
now he's speaking for himself.
I work for Essentry. We are the providers of the data to hedge
No,
fund
I used to
investors.
work for Reuters. We were competitors.
Oh, good. Nice. Then we can talk. We can talk a lot. So we have a lot of vendors. We get crappy data, pardon my French. And then there's a lot of problem for us because for me, my team is the gatekeeper of all the data that comes for entity, companies, securities, and market data, which is like, it goes to Dow Jones and ratings and things like that. Coming back to where we are using generative AI, the answer is we have started. So you're absolutely right that we are in the testing phase. Have we been using AI? Yes. To what she said, machine learning? Yes, to an extent. Not completely, but to an extent. So that's my answer to first question. Second is advantages. It has given us it has shown tremendous progress at the face of it. The difficulty is I do not know how to validate that. And the fourth perspective to that is organizational perspective. Yes, we want to use AI. We want to use everything that is at the suite, that's at our disposal. The problem is we have to keep exploiting what we have, but we have to keep looking at what's there in the future for us so that we can pull that back into our mainstream work. That's what we're thinking.
Interesting. So I'm going to just move quickly ahead because I want us to, we've talked about the issues with making that change. We're in the testing phase, we want to make the changes, there's a little bit of resistance, all these things. When we asked the folks, what is really important in order to be able to have all of these technologies at disposal and the organizations actually working together to be able to do this, what are the characteristics from an organizational perspective to be able to survive and thrive? This is what they told us. So this is organizational characteristics. Data-informed decision-making and cross-functional collaboration came up tops, right? Closely followed by continuous learning. We talked about the difficulty, you have to train everyone and so forth. The customer focus always stays, it's as long as you are actually implementing it with the customer in mind and you're not just doing some sort of mindless testing. And then the comfort with change. These are all things, and just to give you some backdrop, we asked them about a whole bunch of different factors, and these were the ones that they rated as top. Does that resonate? Does that surprise you?
No.
In some instances, I think that there's more emphasis on customer focus versus just handling the data. But I think they both go together because data-informed decision making will serve the customer directly and indirectly. So I think I'm surprised by the low 41% there.
Interesting. By the way, when I say data-informed decision-making, do you see the distinction between data-informed and data-driven?
Yes.
Right. So data-driven is the data is telling us we need to do this, let's do this. Marketing analytics is a great example of that, right? Yeah. It's just huge volume. We know how to work with that. Data-informed, on the other hand, is that there is an element of human interaction there. Well, it's the human in the loop, whatever you want to call it. There's constant checking and iterations that go on with it as well. And I was talking to the head of digital at a major Asian oil and gas company. And his mandate was, I need to increase revenue from my refineries. And I'm going to focus on my distillation column. For those of you who, a distillation column is a very important piece of equipment in the oil refining process. And he had his OT people and he had his IT people, the operational folks who know the process and the engineering and the equipment really well, and the data scientists who know all their models and who can build algorithms and everything well. And he asked them to work together. Cross-functional collaboration, supposedly. The data science folks went off and created these models, and they came up with this presentation, this wonderful presentation, that had a scatter plot, which was tightly aligned. And he was like, wow, this is great. I've never seen a scatter plot like this before. And it was totally wrong. Because what they told them was, you know what? If you increase the temperature of the distillation column, you will get more bottom product. And so anyone who's a chemical engineer, I trained as a chemical engineer, so I started laughing when I heard that, right? Anyone who's a chemical engineer or a chemistry major will know that that's physically not possible, right? It's against physics, it's against chemistry, it's against, and he basically said, you have to be God if you want to do this, right? But the reason was that they looked at the data sets in isolation, and they chose the wrong data sets, right? So I think the lesson here is that data informed is really important. They need to make sure that they get the experts together and talk about this. And we've heard about this not just from a senior management context, but also more from a line manager context as well. So these are the ones which really came out as important. And
question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Were there any correlations between the results you're seeing here and the cost centers? So from the last one that I saw, I'm looking and I see, okay, this is around revenue and profit. That's where the C-suites are looking at. It's revenue and profit generation. And now we come here and I'm thinking to myself, okay, the last few customer focus, the last one was customer service. Where can I spend less money? So I'm really kind of concerned in this situation that they're actually taking the customer out of the picture. And then data informed cost of decision making is high, right? So if I make better decisions, then it costs me less. So I'm just curious if you saw a correlation there.
Well, so the example I gave you was a revenue generation example, right? But I don't think there was any correlation with that. But that's a good question to ask, actually. Yeah. I mean, think about this. This is, 2,500 people almost. And that's just from this year. It's actually very similar over the past few years. Let me just show you this. This is 2022 in gray, and this is 2024 in red. Very, very similar. Very similar. And the reason why things like DE&I and transparent communication, ethical governance of data, the reason why when we asked, because we went back to the executive panels and asked them, why is that so low? I mean, and really what they said was, we feel like we're actually doing a good job. We have systems and processes in place, and we feel we can fathom what we can do with it. Whereas in these other areas, we're not quite sure. And I see it in my management that we're not actually doing this. A lot of it is based on intuition, the decision-making, or we're not getting enough collaboration. It's those silos that everyone's talking about and so forth as well. So that's really what was sort of generated soon.
So I think what struck me right now, like looking at this one, is that we were talking about exponential growth, exponential changes, and yet the reasons or the things that needs to be in there in order to compete are the same reasons for like many. We know that, and still that still has to exist. And then some of the new things that are popping up are the ones that's also going to go down. I just don't see that. And I guess I now reflect on what you said a while ago, dear colleague from around, is that from a leadership perspective, are you actually wired to be able to compete now in this day and age with this? Because it's the same things.
It's surprising that, I can look at it also from another perspective, which is pre-ChatGPT, post-ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And it's still quite similar.
But what you said, like what they responded as most important to compete in Gen AI, between 22 and 24, they all dropped in importance. So the most important thing to compete in Gen AI is data-informed decision-making.
In digital, to compete in this digital era. So it's not just Gen AI, it's digital altogether.
But it dropped off in importance in the last 2 years. How do we read that? If they're saying that's the most important thing to compete in the digital.
To the point I was trying to make earlier, the customer focus dropped significantly there from 22 to 24, and I cannot really validate that in my mind. I can't see it.
So I would look at this as, so these are not significantly different enough. I mean, customer focus maybe to a certain degree, but they're not significantly different enough that that you're saying that there's a cause and effect to it. There's no real cause and effect to it that we can see.
But they're outsourcing it to strategic partners, right? Because that's gone from nothing to.
Well, so one of the things that we did hear a lot about was if you don't have a lot of competence yourself in certain areas, and for example, if someone's closer to your end user than you are, then there's things you can do from a strategic partnership view as well. I want to quickly now just actually ask you your thoughts on the leadership characteristics, because these are all things that ultimately, when we ask them, what is it really important from a leader's perspective, if you are in a business or in an organization, what are those characteristics that are most important to thrive going forward? This is digital and AI-enabled world. That's what came out.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that we've talked a lot. It's funny, Mary talked about curiosity, right? We also had a type of, it was agility, but adaptability is sort of all-encompassing beyond agility as well. So there's a few of these things. Creativity, we talked about that as well. So I think there are, a lot of these similarities that we've heard already from the previous discussions. You see it here as well. Is there anything that you thought was surprising? It should have been there?
Just curious, connected to the previous slide also, did you see anything about hierarchy or the need to do away with hierarchy?
Yes. So the funny thing is, one of the concepts of data-informed decision-making is that the information and the decision-making is done at the level where the expertise is. So I loved what was said before about having the traditional 10 to 12 direct reports now being 40 direct reports, right? Because a lot of organizations, particularly the more innovative organizations, are having that type of lack of hierarchy or less hierarchy. And so you have, and in many cases, when I think about the adaptability part here, part of that is because we're getting a lot of digital natives that are coming into the organization, reverse mentoring the more senior executives, because most of them are senior executives right now. And therefore, there's a lot of knowledge transfer that's going ahead, which is facilitating that. So, who was it that said it'd be great to have a 27-year-old on the board?
Yeah, right next to us, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the kind of thinking that people are experimenting with now. Yes.
I'm curious, it seems like most of your research is with fairly large companies.
It's actually, that's a great question.
Okay.
There is a broad spectrum. I don't have that slide here with me, but it's, when you think about it, it's over 100 countries and it's executives all around. There's a pretty decent amount of folks who are sub, 100 million, sub 10 million revenues as well. So,
Did you cut the data? Because I'm really curious about those companies that are sub 100 million, if the data looks different.
we haven't done it yet. So I think that's a good idea. We had actually done it by geography. I don't have that either. But I think by revenue is another way we can do it as well. So that's helpful.
Right, because the smaller company, I mean, they don't have, some of the things you're talking about are irrelevant in a company in these smaller sizes. And I'm just really curious, particularly from a leadership perspective, where there's not the same amount of legacy and hierarchy, and I mean, not like there's none. I'd love to hear your philosophy on what does leadership look like in those companies.
Yeah, so I'll give you a personal anecdote.
Okay.
So as I said, I've worked with a lot of different companies, different sizes. For the last couple of years, I was working with a company which is a risk management company, Series B funded, like Series B level. I was running product and strategy and M&A. On the product side, we were using LLMs to actually create our own QA process because we didn't actually have. I grew up in the P&G world where we had a three-letter acronym for everything. So P&G, it's current best approach. We didn't have a current best approach for which we could do for our application. So we built one ourselves, and it was done just by rolling up the sleeves and doing it ourselves. That is the level of adaptability we're talking about here as well. My team were all over the world. I had them, some of those digital natives who were working with me. One of them was, actually in a different country in a climbing wall and still being able to do his work and so forth as well. So there's a whole bunch of these things that we see, and even in the smaller companies that we've spoken to, in our roundtables, for example, our Africa roundtable, we had one company who was an HBS alum, actually, who was in that roundtable, and he had all of his board members be communicating on WhatsApp and being agile in that respect. because they didn't go through the large processes and so forth as well. So there are examples of these types of situations. Now, I want to very quickly go, we have a couple more minutes. Very similar type of profile here again. And everything that we've done, by the way, and it's not that there is not enough delegation going on. It's just like we don't emphasize that because we already have a lot of those processes in place. We don't have too much here from a process perspective or from a, bringing people along perspective. And that's why the focus is over there. Everything that we've sort of done, and even when we're doing our program, is through this framework, which is the know, do, be framework, right? What do I need to know in order to understand what a digitally mature organization is and a truly AI-enabled organization? What do I need to do in order to actually build and lead it? And then finally, who do I need to be myself in order to transform myself as well as my organization? Because that involves a lot of change on everyone's part. And we, about a year and a half ago or so, wrote published three pieces in HBS Working Knowledge. So it's freely available. If you go to hbswk.com or whatever it is, you'll be able to see these pieces. And we wrote them in that framework, which is know, do, be. So each one of those three articles is in that. And what you see is this is really a summary of that. Right, in our program, I actually make a laminated card and give it to every single participant. But what you see there is, these are the qualities that you need to be thinking about, right? We talked about the importance of a data-informed culture. We talked about distributed decision-making, that thing about the hierarchy, right? Continuous experimentation and learning. These are all things that you need to be consistently doing, and we don't see that in many organizations where it's consistently being done. And then when you actually are in the do phase, what do I need to do? You really have to be prepared for that journey because it's a lot of hard work to bring everyone in the organization along with you to be able to do this, right? And
That's
so
70%
you need to
of
be
it.
able to upskill that talent. You need to be able to bring in new digital natives who are going to help reverse mentor you and also take you forward and show you all the new possibilities that are out there as well. And then we talked about partnerships, the ecosystem of partnerships, which is really crucial as well. And then finally, about being yourself, right? It's back to you can be a CEO and do top down on certain things like culture change. I think that's really important. But all the other things that we are so used to doing from a top down command and control perspective, that doesn't really fly anymore in this day and age, right? Because people have more information than you. And so you have to be trusting and let go. Your job as a leader is a catalyst to help them actually go and do all of these things. And your job as a leader is to be courageous, to know that, there's all these technologies that could completely uproot everything that we are doing. And we need to be able to kind of figure out which one of these are really going to be useful and then employ them as quickly as possible so that we don't lose that competitive edge. And that's really the essence of what we're doing. So if there's, I feel like there may be a few takeaways for you, but if there's three things that I want you to really focus on, is that now more than ever, organizations that are going to succeed have to embrace a much more data-informed culture and much more cross-functional collaboration, because that's one of the keys for success here. And then today's leaders really have to have a different mindset. It's really about mindset and behavior change. And that's really around continuously learning, continuously adapting, staying curious. I'm glad that curious was used as an important factor. And being very data savvy, being able to understand that. And then at the same time, you've got to really have that courageous mindset, which is to prepare yourself because it is exponential. We have to keep imagining these exponential changes and rely and really make use of that so we can go forward. So with all of that, I'm going to give you a little challenge, a friendly challenge. As you go back to your organizations, what one thing are you going to do differently as a result of today's conversation? Right? And feel free, that's my LinkedIn QR, by the way. Feel free to just send me or through the emails or through the QR, and I'd love to hear from you. because obviously we're always looking for folks to work with and learn from, and perhaps be part of the roundtables and so forth as well. So, this research continues. I'm sure that our program next year is going to be very different again, because there's going to be all these new developments. And with that, thank you very much.